Mr. President, yesterday evening, President Trump shared the news that Attorney General Bill Barr will be leaving the administration in coming days. And I want to take a moment to publicly thank the Attorney General for his service to our country. Under two different presidents and at two very different times in our country's history, Bill Barr gladly answered the call to service. His steadfast leadership has enabled the Department of Justice to continue its mission at a pivotal moment in our nation's history. And I particularly appreciated Attorney General Barr's attempt to get to the bottom of some of the abuse of power by the FBI and the Department of Justice during the latter parts of the Obama administration and early in the Trump administration. During his time as Attorney General, General Barr has consistently fought to improve the safety of our communities across the country by tackling violent crime and aggressively countering transnational criminal organizations. He's been a champion of Project Safe Neighborhoods, which has strengthened community partnerships and helped reduce crime rates across our country. He's taken aim at the threats that exist beyond our borders, from drug cartels in Mexico to economic exploitation and outright theft by China. Through it all, he's been dogged in preventing injustice as in pursuing wrongdoing. So I want to thank the Attorney General once again for not only answering the call to serve a second time, but also for once again serving with distinction and integrity. Mr. President, on another matter, this week is set to be the final week for the 116th Congress, and the American people are counting on us to do our job. We have until this Friday to fund the government, and I hope we can pass legislation that provides more certainty than the stopgap bills that have become the norm in recent years. It's simply impossible for government agencies and departments like the Defense Department to plan with short-term continuing resolutions. They need longer term so they can plan and actually spend taxpayer dollars far more efficiently. This is also our final opportunity to reach an agreement on another coronavirus bill, something that's been on our to-do list since this summer. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to send a stack of bipartisan bills to the president's desk for his signature. Now, these may seem like small ball compared to some of the big issues like keeping the lights on for the government or another COVID-19 relief bill, but they are very important bipartisan pieces of legislation. One of those is the Jenna Quinn Law, which I've spoken on here on the Senate floor many times. The goal of this legislation is straightforward: to stop child sexual abuse. It will help us do that by building on the success of what's now known as Jenna's Law in Texas and in other states, which requires training for teachers, caregivers, and other adults who work with children, who will receive specialized training on how to detect and report and thus prevent child sexual abuse. Signs of child sexual abuse are unique from other forms of child abuse, and correctly identifying these signs is integral to bringing children out of sexually abusive situations. Now, you might ask, if there's a Texas state law providing for this, why do we need a federal law? Well, not every state has done what Texas has done, but also they need the funding to help pay for this specialized training. That's what the Jenna Quinn Law that's pending in Congress will do. And it will encourage other states without similar laws to implement innovative programs to address child sexual abuse. Should be few things more unifying than the war against child sexual abuse, which is why this bill passed the Senate unanimously earlier this year. But days have turned into weeks and weeks have turned into months, and the House still hasn't passed the Jenna Quinn Law. That's not because House members oppose the bill. If it came up on the floor today, nearly every member of the House of Representatives would vote for it. This bill hasn't been able to pass the House because one chairman Democratic chairman won't even give the House a chance to vote on it. For months, Education and Labor Committee Chairman Bobby Scott has refused to move the Jenna Quinn Law. Despite repeated requests from countless child advocacy groups and a bipartisan group of senators and congressmen, it continues in purgatory on the committee calendar. Senator Hassan, Smith, and I sent a letter to Congressman Scott urging him to take action and allow this life-saving legislation to pass the House this year. He responded to our letter saying he'll continue to hold this legislation because he wants to add it to other more complicated legislative measures next year. So when it comes to detecting and preventing child sexual abuse, Chairman Scott thinks we can wait till next year. We can't wait till next year. In short, he admitted that this legislation is so important and so valuable, he can't let it pass on its own. It's got to drag other, more controversial, more partisan pieces of legislation along with it. And just when you think things can't get any worse, they do. As I said, this legislation will provide funding to the states, and it'll encourage states like Congressman Scott's home state of Virginia to implement them. You would think that Congressman Scott would care. If he didn't care for the bill that would benefit the rest of the country, you would think he would care about how it would benefit his constituents in his home district in Virginia. Virginia doesn't currently require this training for teachers, caregivers, and other adults who work with children, and this legislation would fix that. And making this matter even more urgent is the pandemic. Experts believe that the unique conditions created by COVID-19 have caused instances of child sexual abuse to go up, while the number of reports have gone down. Families are experiencing a range of new stressors, including everything from job losses to financial instability to health anxiety, all while isolating at home with their children. And the children who aren't going to school each day are out of sight from the teachers, the bus drivers, and other adults they would otherwise come in contact with, who are most likely to identify and report child sexual abuse. Adults who work with children are the #1 reporters of that abuse. So there could not be a more urgent need for this legislation. This is not a partisan pet project. It's legislation that will save the lives of children across the country. Victims in my home state of Texas and Congressman Scott's home state of Virginia would experience the life-saving benefits of the Jenna Quinn Law. A couple of weeks ago, the Dallas Morning News published an editorial titled, "If Congress Can't Even Pass a Law to Help Save Kids from Sex Abuse, what can it get right?" Well, that's a fair question and a tough but necessary question. When you see what Chairman Scott is doing, it's easy to see why Congress's approval rating is so abysmal. If a high-ranking leader, really, of a House committee will block common sense legislation that is directed at stopping child sexual abuse, how can the American people have faith in Congress's ability to accomplish anything? So, Mr. President, now is not the time to play politics or use child sexual abuse victims as leverage. This bill is one step away from going to the president's desk, and Congressman Scott is the only one standing in the way. It's time to quit playing games and allow the Jenna Quinn Law to pass. Mr. President, now on one final matter. We are less than a month away from the biannual changing of the guard here in Congress before we gavel out for the year. I want to say just a few comments about our friend from Colorado who will soon be leaving the Senate, Senator Gardner. Senator Gardner has proudly represented the people of Colorado for 15 years, first in the State House, then the House of Representatives, and now in the United States Senate. Once you get to know Corey, it's easy to see how this boy from Yuma became such a trusted voice for his home state. For starters, he's a prime example of what Ronald Reagan called the happy warrior. At the end of a speech in 1985, President Reagan spoke about the pursuit of high ideals like liberty, freedom, and fairness, and the reasons our country has to be hopeful and optimistic. He said, "So let us go forth with good cheer and stout hearts, happy warriors out to seize back a country and a world to freedom." Those qualities of good cheer and stout hearts could not be a more appropriate description of our friend from Colorado. Senator Gardner has maintained an understanding, has a very keen understanding of the challenges we have faced as a nation, and he channels his passion and his optimism in finding solutions to those challenges. And there's no question he does get results. In the 6 years he's been in the Senate, Corey has accomplished more than some senators have accomplished in double or maybe even triple that time. He's been a strong voice on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and has helped lead changes to counter some of the most pressing threats facing our country. He helped pass the first ever sanctions on North Korea to denuclearize one of the most untethered states and nations in the world. He's fought to hold China accountable for their gross human rights violations, specifically those targeting the Uyghur people. And he's led efforts to strengthen our relationship between the United States and Taiwan. But I think the accomplishments he's most proud of are those that hit much closer to home. Corey introduced legislation to designate 988 as a national suicide prevention and mental health hotline. It's impossible to know how many lives have been and will be saved by simply adopting this 3-digit phone number. And this last year, he led in the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, the largest conservation bill in a generation. A big factor in Corey's success has been his relationships with his fellow senators, not those backroom transactional relationships you think of perhaps when you think about politics, but I mean real friendships with folks throughout the Capitol complex. If there were a Mr. or a Ms. Congeniality Award in Congress, Corey would win by a landslide. It's common to see him talking not only with senators from both parties, but staffers from other offices. He was once a staffer in Senator Wayne Allard's office, so he can identify with them, as well as the Capitol Police and the countless other men and women who keep Congress running, from cafeteria workers to cleaning staff. He greets every person with the same genuine smile, and he'll gladly spend a few minutes chatting, asking about your family, holiday plans, or how someone's day is going. That sincerity, his willingness to listen and deal with people on such a human and personal level, is something we need more of, not less of, here in Washington, especially these days. So, Mr. President, the Senate will miss our happy warrior and the trademark positivity he brings to even the most contentious debates. And while we're sad to see him go, I know this isn't the last we'll hear of or see of Corey Gardner. The only thing more enduring than his energy is his drive to help people from all places and in all walks of life. So while our colleagues are sad to bid farewell to our friend Corey, we know that Jamie, Allison, Caitlin, and Thatcher are all eager to have him back home in Yuma and see more of him and spend more time together. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I'd note the absence of a quorum.